What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto finds out his parents are alive and abandoned him? If you enjoy, then please like, share and do comments. And also check the description to original creator of this beautiful creation. That name leaves a horrible taste in his mouth as he said it. It was always about Sasuke in this village. He gets all the glory while the person or people who actually did the work get nothing but scorn. Where had it all gone wrong? His life was just starting to get better, but then everything fell apart so quickly out of the blue. You might be wondering who this is thinking such things. Well, it was none other than our favorite orange-clad hero Naruto Uzumaki. The young man for most of his life had been given a hard life due to either the abuse sent his way from the citizens of his home village itself, or the lack of recognition for the many accomplishments he had achieved in his life so far. During the Wave Country mission, it had been he who rallied the people to fight back as well as defeated Haku when Sasuke himself was stuck with so many ice senbon he looked like he was related to a porcupine. Yet the people praised Sasuke when it was his efforts that finished the mission. Hell, the people named a bridge after him and still the people of Konoha refused to acknowledge his prowess. There were other examples to go with that, but if he were to lay them all out, he could write a book as it were. Well, I guess you're wondering how this whole foul mood towards Sasuke all started, or at least the current mood of it, since he had disliked the arrogant ass for far longer than this, since the man was a liar who took credit when credit was not due. Well, it was a few months after Naruto and the love of his life Hinata got engaged. Naruto was having the best day of his life in quite some time, with him and Hinata just having finished up with the preparations for their wedding. Sure, they were fairly young, but some people just wished to tie the knot since in their profession death was a constant looming danger that hung over their heads and wanted to do so before the unthinkable happened. And what made the event even better as well as special to him was the fact that Hinata told him that she was pregnant. Naruto was filled with so much joy. He was gonna be a father, but not just any father, a way better father than his own was to him. Yes, his parents survived the Kyuubi attack to the knowledge of only a select few. Naruto had no idea as to what they were doing the entire time that he suffered in the village, but he did know one thing when they suddenly returned out of the blue about a few years after he had returned with Tsunade to take over as Hokage. Within 2 years after the demon was sealed inside him on the date of his birth, his mother and father had another child. A boy they named Menma, one that would take his place as the rightful heir to not only the Uzumaki clan name but the Namikaze as well. When his parents arrived and showed the village they were in fact still alive, people thought that Naruto would be all but thrilled to know he had family. Sure, they still thought of him as a monster, but this way the monster would at least be leashed by his family so as to obey. But Naruto was quite the opposite. In fact, he hated them with all his being for just up and abandoning him after sealing a demon within him like they had. So many years he had been called worthless and the son of a whore and a pathetic shinobi, and to hear that was not the case, but in fact he was abandoned only made it far worse. But this did not bother his former family any really. As soon as his parents had figured out that they would have another child years ago, they started to forget about him since he as a Jinchuriki was no more than a weapon for the village to use. Menma would be the shinobi that took after his old man and became a one-man army like Manato had been in the Third Shinobi War when he had killed so many Iwa shinobi at once and forced them to surrender. His parents literally walked up the orphanage and just left him there never to return for him after he was born before they disappeared because after all to everyone he had met they had thought of him as the demon brat. So a year went by and eventually the orphanage wouldn't even keep him there anymore and kicked him out to fend for himself. Every day usually ended up with him beaten, stabbed, and almost everything that they could do to try and kill the demon brat. But that story is for another day since it involves so much more to get to this point, and this was about Sasuke right now personally. So, his day was going great. His squad mate Sasuke came back to visit for a bit since even though they weren't friends they still worked together as shinobi and as such needed to trust one another since it could mean life or death in the end. But what Naruto didn't realize was that today would also be the day that his life would come crashing down hard. It started out simple enough, with Naruto running some errands to get things ordered for the wedding. He had managed to buy himself a small proper house to replace the shitty apartment he had lived in most his life. And before you ask how he could do that when people were not really willing to sell him anything, and when they actually did it was of such low quality, well, he used a henge and fake credentials to get the deal started, and once the deal was finalized he showed who he really was. The landowner who sold him the house was pissed that the demon had tricked him, but by that point the deed was his and it was signed and notarized, so there was nothing the asshole could do but take the money and go. He was on his way home after finishing all that, but had a rose in hand to give to his fiancée so as to show how much he loved her. So he snuck into the house and quietly entered as well as tiptoed through the place. He wanted to surprise her, but as he got deeper into his home where Hinata usually was, he began to hear weird sounds coming out the room. "Ah, what is that?" Naruto asked himself as he cloaked himself in chakra to silence his movements, pulled out a kunai, and went into the house to find what is causing the noise. If there was an intruder of some sort he would make said person pay dearly for harming Hinata. He started heading up the stairs because it seemed that the sound was coming from his and Hinata's room, which worried him since so many bad possibilities were running in his head and he hoped none of them were true. Right in front of the door he finally recognized the sound he was hearing, and as he placed it made him lose the color in his face. Naruto quietly grabbed the door handle and turned it slowly so as to not make a sound. He peeked inside the room to see inside, and what he saw broke his heart worse than anything he had ever felt before in his miserable life. There lay Hinata stark naked on their bed with Sasuke himself on top of her thrusting in and out of her. "When are you gonna ditch the dobi and finally come be with me?" Sasuke grunted as he continued to thrust into her. "I mean, come on, you're pregnant with my child." "What?" thought Naruto as his eyes opened in shock. Sasuke was the father of his child, but Hinata had told him that it was his. "How long has this been going on?" "I am waiting. Until I can find a way." "Oh yes, right there. To get some of the Namikaze and Uzumaki fortune so we can live a rich peaceful life after I divorce him." Hinata moaned in ecstasy. "Are you close to finding a way?" "Very. His parents are thinking it might be better to bring him back to the family since apparently their initial plan was not working out as they had hoped. They want me to be a member of their family again? After all the shit they put me through, I'd rather die." But what plan is she talking about? Thought Naruto, since this was all too much for him to bear. "Well, once you get that fortune for us, ditch the dobi and come straight to me." "Of course," moaned Hinata. "I'm gonna come," grunted Sasuke. "Hurry and come inside me, who knows when Naruto will be back." "I'm coming." Naruto watched as they both came with each other, and then he quietly closed the door and left the home he had spent so long working to obtain. It was like a symbol of his hard work finally paying off in the end against all odds, but now the vision was tainted by the soul-crushing reality of the situation that had been revealed to him like this. Just like when he had been told when he was 13 about the Kyuubi sealed within him, it was not supposed to be something he was told, and just like that moment he was not supposed to see his fiancée fucking Sasuke. Naruto ran as far away as he could since he just couldn't take it anymore. He didn't want to be near there, and that was fine with him since nobody wanted him here in the first place. It was as he made his way to a place he found as a child to hide away from people out to hurt him in mobs on his birthday that he finally broke down and cried. He could not contain the tears anymore since he truly wondered why he existed when no one loved him or even liked him. In that moment of grief his mind cleared and the fact that there was a plan for him had come to the forefront of his brain to the point it was all he could process. Naruto was no fool, even though he acted like it since he just didn't want the people to know he was smarter than he let on. He always had a nagging feeling that people were hindering him for some reason, but now this was starting to prove it. The pieces of this so-called plan were coming together in his mind, and he started to realize that the reason his family had abandoned him like they did was that he was meant to be a weapon, nothing more. That was why they wanted him in the family now, since they assumed he would be so happy to have family and be willing to do just about anything to belong in it. But now, he guessed they were going to force his obedience since that plan had ultimately failed, and since the two of them were seal masters with access to a clan filled with those who could literally alter the minds of shinobi who were weakened. Well, it was a safe bet that he would be their weapon in the end against his will. "There is no point in me staying here anymore. The one reason I stayed here in the end lied to me and was just after my parents' money. Still not sure how her plan was going to work, but I don't care to find out really." Naruto told himself. His parents abandoned him, everyone in the village hated him, and his fiancée, who he loved with all his heart, lied to him and was actually with Sasuke to the point of bearing his child. There really was no reason for him to stay here. But if he were to leave, where would he go? Wave was the first place to pop into his head, but the problem with that was that Jiraiya had a spy network that would easily find him and then they would just force him back since there was no shinobi village to stop them. Suna came to mind, but they lost in the failed invasion of their village during the Chunin exams, and while Gaara was his friend, he would not put so much pressure on his still recovering village by relocating there. But then an idea hit him. One of the biggest taboos in this world was the killing of a daimyo. Sure, it happened rarely, but when it did there were major repercussions with said assassins gaining the ire of everyone else around them. If Minato, who had taken the position of Hokage back shortly after coming back to Konoha, which Tsunade was more than happy to give it up since she didn't want the damn position in the first place and had taken it since there were no other candidates other than Danzo and she would be caught dead before she let that emotion-hating warlord ruin the village her grandfather formed in his prime. But if Minato were to try and force Naruto back when he had the protection of a daimyo, well, it would rally every last one of Konoha's enemies with the full backing of their own daimyos as well as their soon-to-be former allies since no one would aid them if they do such a thing to rise up and attack them. Konoha was considered the strongest of the shinobi villages, but even though that might be the case, they were not invincible and had only won with the help of others. And lucky for Naruto, he just so happened to be good friends with such a person who held the title of daimyo. He had saved her life from her tyrannical uncle of all people, and yet Sasuke was given the credit upon reaching the village again. But Naruto was used to that bullshit by now and just kept his mouth shut since he had learned no one would or even cared to hear the truth when it came to him. Sasuke. Naruto growled that name in anger. He wasn't sure how or even when it would happen, but he would return and deal with the situation personally. Sasuke had stolen his happiness once, and he would do the same later on in life. But he wouldn't stop there, since the entire village had made his life a living hell. It was at this point that his mind showed him the truth that he had been purposely suppressing since he had nothing but bad memories and wanted good ones. The poisoned noodles that he was given for free that was dubbed the Naruto Special, that the demon within him filtered out so he did not die. Those who called themselves his friends in the academy mocking him behind his back when they assumed he was out of earshot and laughing at his stupidity as to think that they would truly be friends with the Kyuubi of all people and had acted like this on the orders of their parents for some reason. Here is in giving him the same scripted so-called comforting words every time Naruto was hurt as a child. Telling him that the people would look past their hatred of him in time, never once using other words when it happened. Thus showing that he knew about it and did not care to stop it. And now his own, former now, fiancé. His rage grew in full as these facts all came to him at once. He had played his part since he was afraid of being alone all his life, and yet even when it seemed like that was not the case with a chance of true happiness to call his own, even that was a lie. No more lies. No more pain from those who called him a demon. He would embrace the title they gave him and show them what it means to anger such a thing. I'll kill you all. Naruto took out a scroll he had stashed here in his hiding place along with other supplies he packed up since he would need them as he ran and wrote those words that would scare the village to its core. I'll be back someday, said Naruto as he rolled the scroll up, and when I do Konoha will burn. I'll finish what the Kyuubi started years ago. The accumulated filth of this village will look up and shout, spare us, and I'll look down, and whisper, no. With his mind now fully made up in his plan to leave this place for good, he wondered on how to deliver his message in a way that would have the most impact to it when people finally got it. It took him a minute to think of a proper method of delivery, but in the end he decided on a means. Yet before he did that, he knew there was something that had to be done before he left. So he found Jiraiya himself, the Toad Sage who had him sign the Toad summoning contract, and mocked the man so much that in his rage he called Naruto an unworthy brat and had him watch as he wiped his name off the Toad summoning contract since he was unworthy of it. The man was an idiot, but he was really only interested in peeping on women, so it was obvious. Naruto did this since he knew that he could be reverse summoned if he left, and that would ruin the whole plan as it was. So now Jiraiya couldn't do that anymore, and he was glad. So with the preparations done, he waited until nightfall. He didn't return home since if he saw Hinata he was going to stab her in the stomach so as to kill that cheating whore's bastard child as well as Sasuke's progeny. He wouldn't have been able to restrain himself, so he stayed away. He had all he needed for his one-way trip already, and the house had nothing more than fake memories in the form of pictures that meant nothing to him now that his eyes were wide open as they were. So with scroll in hand he took it and went looking for a Konoha ninja to use for his message. He soon came across one standing guard, which was weird since the security of this place seemed so lax as of late. Weren't there usually at least 2 standing guard? Thought Naruto to himself, but hey, who was he to complain? This would be so much easier to do this way. Plus it just went to show how arrogant the village had become in the years after winning the last war. He could only hope that his departure would serve as a rude wake-up call. He wanted them to fight him with all they had. He wanted to show them that he was not one to be fucked with like they had all his life, and as they laid at his feet dead or very close to it, they would know humility at the end. Naruto started to approach the ninja quietly with a kunai out and firmly grasped in his hand. For so long he had been against killing, but now this would be the defining moment where the old him died, and he would become better than this kami-forsaken village ever would let him become. When Naruto got up close to the guard, he covered the man's mouth and slit his throat, instantly killing him. Once Naruto did that, he made a shadow clone and made the clone henge into the guard he just killed, so if any other guard or ninja stopped by, he would have a little time before they figured out it was a fake. Timing was important right now and he would need all he could get to escape fully. So with the dead ninja pulled away from any and all prying eyes, Naruto decapitated the body, took the head, and burned the rest with a simple fire jutsu to get rid of evidence. Now with the ninja's head he took out the letter and put the letter in the head's mouth. Then he took the head, went to the Konoha memorial stone, stealthily to make sure no one saw him, and stuck the head on top thinking, this ought to scare them enough, and ran out and away from the village easily enough, never to return until he came to get his revenge. And Naruto was unaware of it, but he was about to get a lot of help achieving his revenge. Years ago. Word of warning. The main part of this section is a recap of Titanfall 1 and the story leading up to the part where I have it differ from Titanfall 2. So if you know the story, I will post in bold the part where it differs and you can continue there. Sorry, just want to be thorough for those who don't know the story fully. In an earlier time as well as another dimension altogether, a massive war was raging on that spanned the universe itself. Humanity lived in the deepest reaches of explored space in a vast region known as the frontier. It contained many well-known and inhabited solar systems, but many more worlds remained uncharted. Most people would never travel this far away from normal civilization, but for pioneers, explorers, mercenaries, outlaws, and soldiers, the frontier offered both adventure and opportunity. The Interstellar Manufacturing Corporation originally funded many expeditions to the frontier, promising veterans of their military campaigns in the core systems, the region of space containing the IMC's inhabited worlds including Earth, free land and other benefits in return for starting up businesses and colonies on the frontier. Eventually, the IMC withdrew this support for several reasons, leaving the colonists stranded without outside assistance for several decades. Over time, life continued on the frontier largely independent from the core systems. However, when the IMC returned several decades later to claim eminent domain over the frontier's land, people and resources, the people of the frontier united as the Frontier Militia, utilizing guerrilla and terrorist actions to further their cause. Eventually, this led to the Titan Wars, a series of conflicts involving usage of the Titan platform, the ultimate evolution of modern-day powered exoskeletons. The war ended in a presumed IMC victory, solidifying their presence on the frontier. For the next 15 years, the IMC would relentlessly hunt down the militia and push them to the verge of extinction. 15 years following the end of the Titan Wars, the first militia fleet was now being pursued by Vice Admiral of the IMC, Marcus Graves. On the run for months, the fleet was now running low on fuel and supplies, and had no choice but to conduct a desperate raid on an IMC gas mining world. Landing their troops at the site of a refueling pump supplying their capital ship, the Red Eye, IMC and militia forces fought for control of 3 hard points that would allow the IMC to maintain their air defense and the militia to siphon the fuel. The militia escaped the planet with just enough fuel to last a few weeks. Tracking the remains of the fleet that survived the battle, the IMC stumbled upon a hidden colony in a believed unexplored region of space. Upon further inspection, it was realized that the colony was created out of the remains of Im's Odyssey, the former IMC flagship during the Titan Wars that disappeared during a mutiny conducted by Executive Officer James McAllen. The IMC uses this opportunity to test out their new BRD-01 Spectre combat drones, humanoid robots designed to replace traditional infantry, in a massacre of the town. Detecting an SOS signal sent out by the colony, the militia fleet investigated the site, clashing with IMC forces in the town. Ultimately, the militia made contact with McAllen, who agrees to help them on the condition that they evacuate the colonists. As an offer of trust, McAllen provides the militia with schematics for the IMC refueling station that allowed the fleet access to the frontier. Situated on the planet Demeter, if the facility were to be destroyed, it would take reinforcements years to arrive on the frontier. Having successfully recruited an ex-IMC officer to their cause, the Marauder Corps next moved to Angel City to extract ex-IMC pilot Robert Barker Taub, once one of the best pilots around. McAllen's plan to take out Demeter necessitates taking out the airbase that defends it. However, a full-scale assault would be impossible, meaning that the militia must employ other means to destroy it. This would involve taking out the repulsor towers located on the site, which keep the extremely hostile wildlife away from the base. To take out the towers, the militia must first find one they can access to ascertain the tower's weaknesses. Barker was once stationed at a site involved in prototyping the technology, and could thus provide the militia with the opportunity they need. However, Barker refuses to fly the troops to the base unless one significant obstacle, flagship IM's Sentinel, is destroyed. The militia formulates a plan to attack the ship while in dry dock, hijacking the IMC's own orbital defenses to use in destroying the ship. With the carrier down, the militia then proceed to Base Golden to formulate a way to destroy the repulsor towers at Airbase Sierra. They succeed in this task, and Cheng Bish Lork is able to modify a data knife to send a pulse through the tower to render it inoperable. The militia fleet then gathers in the outskirts of the Demeter system, and waits for the base to be destroyed. During the Battle of Airbase Sierra, Sarah Briggs deploys into the base alone while mainline infantry distract the IMC forces outside. She eventually succeeds in bringing down the towers, though is shot in the arm by Kuban Blisk in the process. The fleet then moves on to Demeter, with pilots and Titans battling on the ground to control the stations that would allow the reactor core to overheat. Ultimately, the core proves more resilient than expected, requiring someone to manually detonate it. McAllen sacrifices his own life to ensure this victory for the militia, resulting in the complete destruction of the Demeter Gateway and the stranding of IMC forces on the frontier. In the months following the Battle of Demeter, Vice Admiral Graves' defects to the militia cause alongside vast quantities of human personnel. In his wake, IMC AI Spyglass is promoted to the rank of Vice Admiral, proceeding to reorganize the remaining forces, now composed mostly of robotic infantry, as the Remnant Fleet. 3 months following Demeter, the militia strike at the first of a number of Spectre production plants, hoping to cut off the IMC's endless supply of expendable infantry. As the campaign ends, the IMC still controls a vast portion of the frontier, but is now on the defensive due to the expected 2-year wait for reinforcements to arrive. However, as of 5 years later, these reinforcements are still nowhere in sight. This is where the story differs from Titanfall 2. So the IMC, tired of this rebellion that they thought should have been dealt with by now, knew they would have to resort to drastic measures to win this war once and for all. And luckily for them, their science division uncovered a means to do so while mining a planet called Typhon. There they found an energy source they dubbed Arc, that had massive destructive potential, and they built the means to use it as a weapon and prepared to weaponize it fully. The militia had caught wind of their plan though and tried desperately to destroy the weapon before it was fired, but before they could even launch the first of their many ships full of brave soldiers in the militia and their Titans to boot, the weapon was fired at their home planet. The information they had gotten was far too late, and they had not the time to escape the beam of light that engulfed their entire planet. And within seconds, the planet known as Harmony was gone, and the militia was gone with it. Yet the weapon they had used to defeat the militia did not just wipe them from existence as they so thought it did. What it had done was move the planet into another dimension altogether. Once the initial chaos of that fact became known, the brightest minds available did numerous tests and proved that their world was doomed still. Whatever energy had brought them here was in fact destroying their world still. They had at least 10 years to build the means to evacuate an entire planet, and so they got right on that. For 10 long years they built the massive ship they named Harmony in remembrance of their old home that was being taken from them. They had plenty of room for every last citizen on the planet, who would be put into cryo sleep to pass the time so that they would be refreshed when the pilot and the crew found them a new home. They had titans and weapons along with all their technology and history stored away since there was no point in leaving it to be destroyed with the planet. And once more, the militia timed the world-ending event wrong, with the ship launching once fully loaded right as the planet exploded. A large chunk of what was now asteroid hit the side of the ship, damaging the main power source. Things looked grim since without power their life support was not going to work. So with the limited amount of power they had now, they scanned for a planet where they could build a harvester so as to replenish what they lost so they could find another more preferable world to live on. In the end they found one, but by the time they got there, their power output was on the last shred of it. So using what they had, they were able to launch one Titan with its pilot planet side to find a place to build the harvester. The rest was used and stored in the cannon that would launch the heavy ordnance that consisted of the parts they would need to build it along with the robotic engineers that could build it quickly since they worked faster as well as longer than humans. So the pilot, known as Jack Cooper, was sent with the mission to save the militia towards the planet. He landed high up in the mountains that were covered in snow, and soon after making planet fall things went south so fast. Whatever energy this planet used was interfering with his Titan BT-7274, which he just called BT for short, and thus was draining his power fast. Jack was able to get him into a cave so as to protect him from the elements for the moment, and then set out to find a place to build the harvester. The situation looked grim, but he could not fail or it meant the end of so many lives. But sadly, Jack was caught in an avalanche that buried him alive. He was too deep to dig his way out and knew that he had failed. He could not call for help since his comms did not sync up with Harmony here, and he was buried alive with no one near him, so he was fucked and he knew it. He felt great sadness over the fact that everyone who was counting on him was going to die, and could only curse the damned IMC for being the greedy corporate bastards that they were to abandon them for about 70 years and think they could just claim the land when they wanted later after leaving them all for dead. And to go so far as to try and blow up a planet as well, which they did technically, but it wasn't instant like they thought it would be. So in his final moments before he succumbed to the cold, he used his helmet to record his final message. One that told of who he was and where he had come from. He hoped that one day it would be found, and as such the history of the brave men and women of the now dying militia would not be forgotten to time. And with a final apology to his Titan, who he considered a friend, Jack Cooper perished. His body would lay and rot there for the next 30 years. Yet his helmet, which was a heavily armored as well as sophisticated piece of tech, would survive the ages. Those on the Harmony perished since without power their systems began to fail one by one. Those in cryo sleep were lucky since they were peacefully dreaming away as they passed. Those still awake though had to suffer as they breathed in the last of the oxygen till there was nothing left and then fell over dead as their bodies struggled to breath. And there the helmet laid, hidden deep in the snow, shifting a bit over a time. Until one day, a device is activated that melted the snow of the country away, thus bringing spring to a place where those who lived never thought it would. Konoha day after Naruto's departure. The day was starting off great for Kakashi. His student Sasuke, which he considered his best and only student due to the fact that Sakura was nothing more than a fangirl to Sasuke and Naruto. Well, the brat was the village weapon who he was ordered to not only watch but report anything unusual about since he was put on this squad. He didn't want to watch him, but since he had a Sharingan which was capable of suppressing the Kyuubi if ever came the need for such a thing, he could understand why it had to be him. But that was not what was on his mind now, since Sasuke just told him the other day that he was going to have a child. This was great news since the Uchiha clan had been slaughtered down to just him and Itachi since the latter had done the deed. So hearing that Sasuke was beginning the process of rebuilding his clan up was good news indeed. And what made the whole scenario even better in his books was the fact that it was with the demon brat's own fiancée, who didn't even care for the demon but she was just after something. Though Kakashi wasn't told what she was after, he had to imagine that it was something really great to have to pretend to love that demon for so long enough to actually have with him and convince him that he was going to be a father. As if any women in the village would willingly do that. Any woman who bore his child in the future would know the reason they did so was mainly cause of strong genetics, so their next weapon would be strong. Then once born, the mother would forsake the child as Naruto himself was, with said boy restrained long enough to extract the demon from him into the new vessel. Then Naruto would be eliminated and discarded to be forgotten. That last part would be easy enough since no one cared for the brat, so no one would remember him when they had a new toy to play with, and by play they meant hurt a lot for years to come. This way it belittled the demon spawn so as to show the fact that they would always be under the foot of their betters until they died. It made Kakashi chuckle that even Kushina, the send vessel of said demon, would go along with this, but she didn't care since it wasn't her suffering. She was so cold at times. Kakashi was heading to the memorial stone as he does every day to mourn his lost friends, Obito and Rin, who died in the last Shinobi War. But when he got there he saw something that disgusted him to his very core and caused him to vomit out his breakfast, since while he had seen death, being a shinobi and all, it was part of the job, but never something like this. There was a head stuck to the top of the memorial stone with a face of terror etched on its features and a scroll rolled up and jammed in its mouth. Who could have done this? Thought Kakashi while struggling not to throw up even more than he already had. At this point it would just be stomach acid, and that hurts to puke up. After making sure he wasn't going to empty his stomach anymore, Kakashi walked up to the memorial stone, grabbed the head off the top of it, and took out the scroll from the head's mouth. Kakashi opened the scroll and took off to the Hokage tower, worry etched all over his face. Minato Namikaze was having a bad day. He sent his son on an A-rank mission to aim to investigate a rumor that could spell trouble for them. He knew he was a Jonin, one of the youngest to ever achieve that ranking, but he earned it, yet he couldn't help but think that today was gonna take a turn for the worst somehow. Shaking himself out of thought, Minato was about to get back to the horrid beast called paperwork that was a bane to all cages no matter where they were located, when Kakashi jumped in through the window. The look of worry on his face made Minato feel a bit uneasy since Kakashi never really worried about much. The man kept his cool through some of the worst things he has faced, so to see him like this now meant he had really bad news to give him. Damn it, Kakashi, how many times have I told you use the door? Why is it that you and Jiraiya don't listen to that one simple order? Of all things is beyond me. Doors were meant to the entrance point to a room, that's what it is there for. Minato said with frustration evident in his voice toward his student's actions. But sensei, we have an emergency, Kakashi said with so much worry you'd think he'd seen a ghost, with the color of his face matching the mood. What is it, Kakashi? Minato asked, his curiosity piqued as well as the feeling in his gut about having a bad day only getting worse. This note, sensei, spoke Kakashi while holding out the scroll he found in the head's mouth. Minato took the scroll from Kakashi and started to read it. It did not take long since there were only 4 words on the scroll itself, but those 4 simple words had so much meaning behind them. When he finished reading the scroll his face was showing that he was worried, scared, but also angry at the boy even he himself considered a demon, thinking he could get away with it. Sure, he understood the difference between the container and the demon itself, but he didn't care since Naruto was a weapon, so it didn't matter what he was called, just the fact he would obey any and all orders given when called. Where did you find this, Kakashi? Minato asked with anger evident in his voice. I found it on top of the memorial stone in another Konoha shinobi's mouth, said Kakashi. In another shinobi's mouth with the head on top of the memorial stone? Minato said in rage, with so much killing intent leaking out of him at this point that most people would have a hard time breathing around him due to it. Yes, this is very disturbing. Who would have thought that he would do such a thing? I thought we kept up the act pretty well all these years to keep the plan going, Kakashi said while thinking what went wrong. Yes, we kept up the act perfectly. Sure, there was the issue of his scorning us as family when we returned instead of embracing us like we had hoped, but we were making and just finishing up the seals that would have fully made him obedient to our orders. Do you know why he would have done this? From all reports you yourself submitted, he never killed before, so why start now? I thought he had Hinata to keep him calm and happy after all the shit people put him through? Minato asked. What could have gone wrong? Kakashi thought while thinking over what Minato said. Yet a minute after he thought about it, something came to his mind that explained what happened. Shit, Kakashi groaned in annoyance when he remembered what his student Sasuke had said to him a few days ago. What? Minato asked, wanting a full explanation as to why this was happening. They had planned Naruto's life out so well with the abusive childhood to break his spirit, and then placing a woman, which Hinata volunteered to play the part for some reason that Minato was unsure of, in his sights to show him false love and affection to keep him loyal to the village so as to protect his supposed loved ones from harm. Yet now that plan was out the fucking window and he wanted a good explanation as to why the plan they spent years enacting was failing when it was working just yesterday. I think Hinata and Sasuke got tired of acting, because Sasuke told me that Hinata was pregnant with his child. Kakashi concluded. Are you fucking serious? Minato asked in disappointment because he thought they could keep up the act longer. But if Naruto had managed to find out the truth about Hinata not actually loving him like she pretended to, then their plan was in shambles. He pushed a button to speak to his secretary, and ordered multiple hunter nin to be rounded up. He was going to find the brat and restrain him until the seals were done with under lock and key. He was not going to let the village weapon try to escape his duty to the village and would make sure he never left until his loyalty was enforced by seal. Yes, he just told me a few days ago, but Naruto was talking about it a longer since Hinata told him it was his own. Kakashi told him. Alright, Minato said as he snapped his fingers. As Minato snapped his fingers, the hunter nin he had ordered appeared before him in mass. Hunt down the demon brat and take him to the deepest cell we have in our prison. If he resists, you have permission to use as much force as possible, but do not kill or cripple him since he is our weapon and needs all limbs to be such a thing. Minato told them. They nodded in understanding and then all vanished to find the brat in the village, fully unaware that he was not even in it anymore. Right now he had managed to make it to the bridge that was named after him. The trip they took to wave for the mission had taken so long due to the fact that they were attacked on the trip there as well as the fact they were escorting a civilian who did not have the speed of a shinobi. So he got her fast enough since there was nothing hindering him such as a group or heavy supplies. He had learned to survive the worst and all that forced training was paying off now. Once at the bridge, he hanged into someone else since while he trusted the people who lived here since he was their hero, he would not put it past Konoha Shinobi to come here and try and extract information of his whereabouts one way or another if they even thought he was here. This way, they honestly had no idea, and if they used a Yamanaka to pry into their minds and see if they were telling the truth, well, they would honestly not know he was here. So with hands up and going, he made his way into the village. He had just enough money to buy a simple rowboat, which was all he needed since he was trying to be stealthy and no one looks for a rowboat. By the time he shoved off from the land itself, mentally apologizing to Tazuna and family who he had bought the boat from for not telling them the truth on the matter, it was still quite early in the morning. He waited until he was far off from shore before he dropped the henge and summoned up shadow clones to row the boat while he himself slept. He had been up for so long and his body was just about to give out at this point. So while he slept, his clones rowed slowly towards his destination. 2 weeks later. The past 2 weeks had been rough for him, but not too bad all things considered since he had dealt with far worse days. His provisions ran out within the first 5 days, but he easily rowed towards the shore and hunted for more food to bring along. It was the case of making sure to cast off from the shore before he slept that got to him. Sleeping on the water in a shaky boat was not ideal, but it was far better than the alternative which had a high chance of him being captured and dragged back to Konoha. As he was now, with the little training that he had been given, he knew he was no match for seasoned shinobi of all ranks in mass coming after him. Even if he tapped into the Kyuubi's energy, all it did was enhance his own capabilities which were minimal at best right now. The most powerful thing he had was the Rasengan, but that was one jutsu over so many others that it didn't really help the matter much. And yes, he and the Kyuubi worked in sync with one another. No one knew this, but he had talked to the demon when he learned the truth about having it sealed into him when he was 13. Now while they worked together, it was not a friendship sort of deal. The seal that contained the creature made it so if Naruto died he died as well, so this partnership was out of self-preservation. The Kyuubi kept him alive and kicking with moment of aid in the form of his chakra to avoid death, and Kyuubi lived longer. It was simple as that. Eventually, he made it to his destination, which took longer since he had to row around so much land instead of heading towards a port that was closer to Sprain. But now he was here, and as he looked around, it finally dawned on him that he had no idea as to where the hell to go right now. The last time he had been here was with the group to protect Coyuki, and as such they were led to where they needed to go one way or another. Even when they left via port they had been led. So with no means to know if he was going the right direction, he set off towards what he was hoping was the capital where his friend would be. Yet 5 days later, with no capital in sight, he realized that his sense of direction sucked big time in strange lands. He wished he had a map, but he had no money to buy one now since he had used all his money to buy the boat that he had sealed away in a scroll. But now that it was getting dark, he saw a rock in the distance that was jutting out of the ground like a cover of some sort. He had looked up and saw that it seemed like it would rain, so no one to overlook temporary shelter. He went there and set up a camp. He had some rabbit to cook that he had caught earlier, and he had firewood stashed in another scroll so he would have some in such a situation like this where there were no trees or the like in the area. This place was just one massive field filled with flowers of all sorts, which he had to admit was beautiful to look at now that he took the time to actually notice it. Once he set up the campfire and placed the meat on a metal stake so as to cook, he unsealed his sleeping bag and sat down on it to relax. These past few days he had been able to actually do so since he was in a country far from fire, one where he highly doubted his family, a word he mentally retched at saying even in his head, would think he would or was even able to get to. He had to admit that travel between this country and the mainland was expensive, but he had gone cheaper and used a rowboat to get past all that, so he was fine. It was when he got up to grab his food off the spike and then just dropped onto his ass to enjoy it that he felt himself land on something metal that he had not seen there. Curiosity got the better of him since he wanted to know just what he had sat on. So he moved his sleeping bag and saw a small mound that he had not seen since the color matched the ground a bit. So digging a bit into the ground to see just what it was he sat on, he finally got a good enough grip to pull the item out of the ground. What he saw amazed him since it was unlike anything he had ever seen in his life. He would have been more surprised, but this country was known for uncovering lost tech as well as their brightest minds making new stuff. That was how they got airships and trains here along with the chakra armor, and who knew what else. Perhaps this thing, which he easily deduced was a helmet since it was obvious to see that it was a prototype they made or something. The helmet was unique, this he had to admit going by its shape and design. And as he looked it over to see the full detail of it, he saw the area which was cut out as a visor, which the design of that was weird to him since it wasn't normal like helmet went, but an odd design that seemed more artistic than practical. It was as he looked at it from the front that the visor lit up in a blue hexagon-like pattern. He dropped it in surprise since he had no idea that that was going to happen or even what was actually happening right now. But if he thought that was strange, what happened next only made it stranger than it already was. From the helmet, he heard a cracked, emotionless voice. Weak, yet somehow still audible to hear clearly enough. Pilot. Naruto was on his ass looking at the helmet that he had just dropped out of surprise. The damned thing had spoken to him, and that did not bode well in his mind since as far as he knew only cursed objects could possibly do such things if even they were a thing. He had never seen one and the ones he heard about were only in stories to scare children, so it was more than likely that they did not. But eventually his curiosity overcame his fear and he picked the helmet back up. It didn't talk again, but the visor was still lit up in the hexagonal light that was there before. So wondering what would happen if he put the thing on, he looked at the inside for a minute before he simply said to hell with it and placed it on his head. Nothing drastic happened, which he was happy about, but he did hear a voice now speaking clearly to him via means he was not sure of. To whoever might find this helmet of mine. My name is Jack Cooper and I am a registered pilot allied with the militia, but that name more than likely will not mean much by the time someone finds this. As I record this, I have been buried alive by an unforeseen avalanche and simply wish for our memories to be remembered into the future, which we ourselves will not. We are not a hostile force out to conquer your world, and if things had gone as planned, then you as well as the rest of the people on this planet wouldn't have ever known we were even here since we didn't plan to stay. Hell, I don't even know if you can understand me since for all I know we more than likely don't speak the same language. But we came here since our ship, which is massive in size, is broken. Our power is dwindling due to the damage done to it, and we had to make an emergency stop to this plant to find a means to replenish it so as to make repairs and be on our way once again. But that is not going to happen now. I was our people's last hope, and I failed. I can only hope that by some miracle that my Titan BT survives the test of time on this world. He was supposed to aid me, but shortly after coming to this planet, The native energy here began to sap his own, and so he was forced to power down to conserve what he had. I tried to set out alone, but well, I already mentioned I am buried alive in snow, so no need to repeat it. Whoever you are, please. I ask of you to find my friend. Find my Titan BT and see if he is alright. This is Jack Cooper, signing out. May the men and women who proudly served the militia be remembered. I'm sorry BT. Following the end of the recorded message, Naruto was shown a video of the events in the Titan Wars that had led up to the defeat of the militia. Naruto watched this in amazement that such things happened places other than his own world, and on a scale that made Shinobi Wars seem so insignificant by comparison since those only dealt with countries. This had been so many planets at war with one another, and while most of the information he saw went over his head, he understood wanting to fight those who thought themselves as your superior and demanded obedience upon arrival. Naruto had been in the same boat since he had been left to fend for himself only to have the people who called themselves his parents arrive and try to control him with their supposed love. Like he would be so desperate for such a thing that he would just accept it. Like I said though, he wished he could fully understand the video, but it was full of names of companies he had never seen, planets he had never been to, as well as people he had never even heard of, so it was not really relevant to him. But what was relevant was the fact that this man's dying wish was for whoever found his helmet to check up on his friend. While Naruto highly doubted that he was still alive, he wouldn't be him if he didn't go and make sure. Besides, what else did he have to do right now? It wasn't like he was on some sort of timetable since he was essentially hiding from those who would send him back to Konoha to force him into submission. There was no time limit to that. So hearing the helmet beep as he was heading in the right direction, he set off to find what he assumed were the remains of Jack Cooper's friend. And considering that he said Titan, he guessed his friend was large and would leave massive bones. Several hours later, Naruto was surprised that it took him so long to get here. But then again, it was the dead of night and he had been just about to sleep when he had literally stumbled upon a marvel of scientific technology by pure chance. So his desire to see this whole expedition through to the end was making his adrenaline pump and kept him moving onwards. Eventually his journey led him to a cave, which was pitch black. So finding a stick, he wrapped some gauze around it as well as some rubbing alcohol to light it up as a makeshift torch. When he was able to see, he ventured in since the helmet was beeping the further he went inside the place. He had to admit this cave went deeper than he possibly thought it would and wondered if it would ever really end. But eventually it did in one massive cavern, and in the center of it was a massive metallic creature that was kneeling there. He was skeptical of moving closer to it, but since there was really nothing else he could do, he braved forward. When he got close, he saw the thing move, which caused him to jump back in fear as he wiped out a kunai in defense. He honestly wondered if that would help at all, but it was better than just standing there like some sort of idiot empty-handed. "Greetings," said the creature as it looked up at him with one shining blue eye that seemed like it was dimming out somehow. Naruto was not sure, but it was like when a light bulb was dying and flickering from lack of power. "I am the Titan designated as BT-7274. But I am also called BT." Naruto's eyes opened wide in shock. This creature was what the man Jack Cooper had asked him to check up on. "Dear Kami, I am currently in standby mode," said BT in a weak cracking voice that showed that he was near the end of his limited power source. He had saved up all that he had to deliver the message to either his pilot Jack or anyone else who lived here in the hopes that they could replenish his power source. "Require additional power to function." Naruto saw the machine's side open up, and in it were 3 canisters which he assumed was its power source since it mentioned about requiring power to function. He was not sure what standby mode meant though, but he understood mechanical things enough to know they needed power to run, and something this size more than likely needed a lot of power to function. So Naruto took the handle of one of the batteries from its slot and looked at the thing. He had no idea as to what to do with it since this tech was beyond anything he had ever seen and was willing to bet anyone else as well. Not hard to guess though when Jack had explained that the militia were not only from another world, but another dimension altogether. The man had asked for aid for his mechanical friend with his dying breath so Naruto would find a means to honor his dying wish. He thought hard on it for quite some time until a solution came to him. It was not the brightest one, but it was one all the same, as well as the only one he had to offer. So holding the battery with both hands, he sat down and began to infuse the thing with his own chakra. He saw the thing light up while his chakra was turned into what appeared to be a lime-green liquid, but he nearly passed out when the thing was about a 12th full. He knew this was not even close to enough since there were 3 containers and he only barely scratched the one, but luckily for him he had a far greater source of power inside him to finish the job. So calling upon the Kyuubi himself, who only allowed this since he too was curious about something not from this world, he began the process of transferring energy once more. This time he was able to fill the battery up fully, but unlike when he had done so with his own power, this time the energy inside it was red instead of green. Hoping that it would help, he popped the thing back into BT. He saw the compartment slide back inside the machine, and waited. Naruto saw as red sparks of electricity surged out of the machine and began to back away slowly out of fear of it exploding or something like that. Unknown energy source acquired, said BT in a weak monotone voice, processing data, configuring, adapting to use energy source. Reboot required, and then the machine fell over flat on its, well he would say stomach, but Naruto was unsure if that was the correct term to use here for this. He stood there and watched in wonderment of if this thing would get back up again or would it remain down like it was. But he got his answer when BT's hand moved, and bit by bit the rest of him started to move as well. Eventually, BT got back to his feet and saluted the young man. My sensors indicate that the neural link I had with pilot Jack Cooper has been severed. My pilot has become KIA, establishing neural link with new pilot required. What the hell is a neural link? Asked Naruto in confusion. Jack Cooper had told him a lot that he did not know via his recording, but this was not one of them. The process links us up on a subconscious level so that I may converse with my pilot and sense his status from afar. Oh great, said Naruto in a huff, another voice in my head. Just what I need. I detect sarcasm. You fucking think? Said Naruto. While he was not sure whether he wanted such a thing to happen to him, he had to weigh his option here. If he didn't do it then someone else would in time. So he decided to be the one to do this since what was the worst thing that could happen really? Fine, I'll do this neural link you mentioned with you. Confirmed, said BT as he kneeled down. Naruto questioned what the hell was happening right now, but he saw BT open his, what Naruto assumed was his head, and showed that inside it was a chair surrounded by so much technology beyond what his world was capable of. Please step inside to confirm neural link. Look, said Naruto as he hesitated to just walk into the mouth of a mechanical being. I like living, and being eaten alive is not how I want to go out. Trust me, said BT simply. This made Naruto twitch a bit out of surprise since that was not something he expected the machine to say. But he had come this far already so he might as well go all the way to the end. So Naruto donned the helmet that once belonged to the now deceased Jack Cooper and climbed into the chest of his Titan. BT closed up and everything went black for a bit before he heard BT talk. Protocol 1. Link to pilot. Establishing neural link. Naruto started to see green lines in his field of vision as he winced in discomfort. Then all of a sudden his vision went white like a blinding light had flashed in his eyes. But just as quickly as it happened, it was over and done with. Neural link established. You are now confirmed as acting pilot of BT-7274, Protocol 2. Uphold the mission. What exactly was your mission here? Asked Naruto. Jack had not really gone into detail about that in his final message. My former pilot and I were to seek out a proper landing zone to summon the ordnance needed to build a harvester. And what is a harvester? Why would you need one here? A harvester is a machine capable of collecting materials far more efficiently than standardly mining the land by hand has done, as well as collecting of energy and power. The harmony required power due to external forces damaging our power supply. Upon completion, we were to defend the harvester until maintenance upon the harmony were complete and the harmony was fully charged up once more. Then we would proceed to scrap the harvester and leave the planet. Well, now what is the mission? Asked Naruto. He had heard through the video log that this all happened 30 years ago, so if the ship needed power as bad as they did, well, they were all dead now since the harvester had not been built. Since the people waiting on that ship you mentioned have been there without power for the past 30 years. So they're dead now. Noted, BT said simply. Man, you are cold, said Naruto in response to the lack of any form of emotion in his voice. My core is approximately. BT, said Naruto so as to stop this from going further, don't take my words literal every time. It was just a simple expression, nothing more. Noted. So what now? Protocol 2. Uphold the mission. Well, said Naruto with a laugh, you're devoted to a cause, I will give you that. And since I am now linked to you like this, I guess I'll help. So what are we looking for as a place to settle down? The ideal location to complete the mission is one where we shall not be disturbed while the harvester operates its functions. We did not wish to trouble the natives of the planet if at all able, but will defend our equipment if necessary. So an isolated place where no one goes nowadays, said Naruto in thought. He had read many books as a kid. Some of them had maps of the place as well as history of various places as well. It took him a few minutes, but then an idea came to him which was perfect. I know of the perfect place to go. Location? Years ago, before I was even born, there was a war that decimated my ancestors' homeland to the point it is nothing but ruins. No one goes there now, so it is perfect. Landing zone parameters sound ideal. You could say that again, said Naruto with a smile, since the place was perfect since BT described it to AT with the idea for the ideal location. Landing zone parameters sound ideal. Naruto was not even going to say anything about that. BT was a machine that took things at a literal sense, and that was just the way he was. So no point trying to fix that. But while on the subject of what BT can and can't do. Quick question, said Naruto, are you able to fly? My class of Titan is not capable of flight. Well shit, said Naruto in deeper thought. The country of Whirlpool was an island country, son. The only way there was by boat or flight. Since he doubted any boat he could get his hands on would be capable of staying afloat with BT aboard, he had hoped he could fly. Then Whirlpool might not be the ideal place then. Elaborate. Whirlpool is an island country, explained Naruto, so since I don't have a boat to get you there, we can't get there unless it is by flying, which once more I don't have the means to do. Processing information. Not sure what you can do with that, but I am open to any and all suggestions on the matter. My armored body is sealed watertight. As long as my pilot remains inside my chassis, I can walk towards our destination regardless of the water. Well, fuck me, I guess, said Naruto with a chuckle. BT was getting far more interesting by the second, and he was already interesting from the get-go, so this was a good thing in his book. I do not contain the human anatomy to perform such a function. Naruto was dead silent as he heard the response. He did not expect that or any really. It sort of ruined the moment. I now understand that was sarcasm. Look at that BT, said Naruto with a chuckle and a twitchy eye, going 2 for 2. Man, you are on a roll. So let's get going then. One moment please, said BT as he locked up as he stood there in place. Naruto wondered what he was doing, but it wasn't long until he got his answer. Self-diagnostic scan complete. With only one battery full, I am incapable of fighting at full capacity. My systems are at minimal working capacity. Not ideal for our situation. Well, since we are only walking to our destination without needing to fight anything, said Naruto in thought, since that did seem bad at first, but like he said, they were only going to walk to their destination. That won't be a problem. Affirmative, said BT simply as he began to walk out the cave. He had spent the last 30 years in alone waiting for Jack to return, but now he had a new purpose. A new pilot to uphold Protocol 3. Protect the pilot. 2 days later, the trip towards Whirlpool had gone far more smoothly than Naruto had expected. Leading BT towards water was easy enough, with only one group of traveling merchants seeing him run by from a distance. That man would then go on to the nearest tavern and drink himself stupid for the night as he told people of what he had saw. No one would believe him, of course, but that only made him drink more until he simply passed out entirely. BT had a compass function that worked fine even with the minimal functions he was able to perform, and with that compass he pointed BT in the right direction towards Whirlpool. He himself had never been there, but he had read about it in a history book, one of many that the village threw out for reasons he was not sure of, but hey, it was a free book so it mattered little to him. Once they hit water, Naruto was sealed inside BT, who while he was airtight had a stable source of oxygen so that Naruto would breathe easily, as well as the added benefit of a simple hose he could eject towards the surface to replenish the supply when needed every 12 hours. But eventually they reached the banks of Whirlpool country itself, with them avoiding all other countries as they did since there was no need for BT to reveal itself to the world, at least not yet when he was only capable of minimal functions with so little power. Naruto was finally able to get out of BT, which he then proceeded to stretch the fuck out of just about everything on his body, since for the love of God he had been cooped up in a small confined space for 2 days straight. The only saving grace to it was the digital screen that showed what BT was seeing, like he was not covered from the front. The view was amazing to say the least, especially the whirlpools that surrounded the island country itself, like the book had said they did. From their depth it did not bother them, since they walked beneath them fully easily enough. Naruto looked around and saw the ruins of the Uzumaki clan, just as he pictured it in his mind. BT stood still as he did a scan of the place for an extensive amount of time. It was only after he finished that he declared the area perfect for the ordnance payload to be dropped. Naruto told him to make it so, but then BT mentioned that he needed more power to complete said action. So Naruto spent the next several hours replenishing all 3 batteries of BT, and sweet Kami was he exhausted by the end of it. He knew that when they began mining power that he wouldn't have to do this anymore, and he was honestly looking forward to it. Soon after being fully powered, BT sent the message to the Harmony, which still remained in space after all this time, and the ordnance that had been powered up with a reserved amount of power fired onto their location. As Naruto waited for this thing to crash land into the ruins of his ancestors, he asked questions to BT, who answered them as best as he could. The main one he had to ask was if there was a means to shield the area. He knew that if and when this device began its work, that any as well as all sensors from any village would probably feel it and all come running here. He didn't want to deal with all that, since he wanted to build a new home here, and that wouldn't be possible if enemy shinobi killed him and stole all the technology for themselves. BT did tell him that shield generators did in fact exist, as well as contained the ability to cloak the designated area in all manner of ways to deter would-be intruders. This made Naruto chuckle, since it worked perfectly for him. Shortly after that moment, Naruto felt the ground rumble as the ordnance fell to the ground hard. It was a giant metal container full of the materials to make the harvester, as well as several drop pods filled with robotic men, which Naruto was not as shocked to see since he was used to BT at this point, who immediately went into overdrive since time was a factor and began to build the device. Their programming had not been altered since the initial one had been installed, so they were not aware of the fact that the Harmony was dead now. But as they did their work, Naruto set out to find a comfortable place to relax, since there was not much else he could do at this point. And for the next 3 days he watched those robots build up the harvester until it was done, and saw as it fired up the first surge of power towards the Harmony out of the many that would continue to do so. Once it began to operate, Naruto told BT to order whatever was needed to build the shields as soon as possible, since they would need them ASAP. BT did so, which went off without a hitch. He was able to override the systems of the Harmony and access the control panels for the robotic workforce on board the ship. With them up and about, they were able to load as well as send down the requested ordnance. So little by little, they built up the shield-generated field to protect their future projects that would take place behind the walls of energy designed to keep people out. As Naruto stood on the tallest hill overlooking the massive area he now had free reign over with a vast workforce of robotic builders, he remembered one of the places from Jack's helmet that it showed him. Angel City. The place was massive as well as the pinnacle of technological commerce and living. His newly discovered dream of a better, more advanced world would begin with a city like the one he had been shown, so with the aid of BT, who ordered a home to be sent in and built for his pilot to live in, he made the plans to begin the construction of New Angel City. But that would take time. Yet fortunately this island had more than enough resources to build such a thing, given the harvester was able to do so better than any human could. So while he knew it would take months if not years for his dream city to be constructed in full, he knew that there was so much technology that these people had left behind in death that he had not a clue as to how it worked. So he asked BT if there was something they had that could speed up the learning of said technology, and to his joy he was told there was. BT explained about what he called learning pods, dubbed so by the scientists who spent years not only making the things but installing an entire civilization's worth of data into them. The device was simple in design, at least from the outside. It was a cylindrical container that opened up long ways from the top as a whole, and once it did you would see the backboard you were to lay on while the machine worked. It was meant to be placed at an angle so you leaned back comfortably, and once activated you were transported to a virtual world in a fancy-looking building that he had no means to describe. You would appear in the center of a room with multiple hallways splintering off in all directions, each representing a field of expertise from cooking utensils to advanced machinery. Naruto was surprised that piloting a Titan was not a part of this thing, but BT had explained that the program for that was separate entirely since this one was made to show people how to use what they deemed as modern technology. The militia had planned on reaching a new world so as to populate when they found the ideal one to colonize, one that suited all their needs. But the issue with the galaxy is that when it came to such planets, there were people there already, so their brightest minds built these pods to teach those who did not have such knowledge that they were not hostile conquerors or the like. They were just immigrants of a planet that no longer existed. The exchange of knowledge would be more than an ample trade for the right to colonize, but now that vision was gone since the militia was no more. But luckily for them, Naruto was a man who sought such knowledge so as to understand their technology fully. He wanted to bring forth a new era to the people, one of a more peaceful nature and time. Sure, he knew that the way the world was there would be war to achieve such a dream, but he would use this technology to make it a short one. Naruto watched as an entire warehouse was built with these learning pods installed. He smirked as he opened one the moment that they were operational. He used the shadow clone jutsu to make copies of himself, which BT logged into his memory banks that such an ability existed in the first place without additional equipment, each that took a different pod. Each learning a different thing. While he knew the drawback would be a massive headache from all the information coming to him at once, he would bear that pain. He had so much to learn. 2 years later, over the course of the next 2 years, the country of Whirlpool was changing in appearance. As Naruto trained in countless simulations to master the weapons of another civilization as well as his newly acquired Titan, the thousands upon thousands of robots known as MK3 Mobile Robotic Versatile Entity Automated Assistant, or MRVN for short, were building the city of New Angel City from the ground up. They did not need sleep nor food. They worked around the clock all day and only stopped late at night to head towards their stations so as to recharge themselves. And over the course of 2 long years, their work was finally complete, with the ruins of Whirlpool now becoming an exact replica of what Angel City once looked like in the past. They even succeeded in launching multiple satellites into space, so now Naruto had the perfect map of the world with the ability to see what he needed in any given country at any time. But while the city itself was done, there were no people living in it other than Naruto himself. He survived by eating the fruits and vegetables that had been flash frozen on the Harmony. Sure, they tasted bad, but they were still good somehow. He had the robots go out and collect the wildlife on the island as well, which they did, and once captured they were put into farms that they could live in. This way they could breed and provide more food in the future. He was one man so he wouldn't need much, but in time when this city was thriving they would need the numbers. While New Angel City was now up and running fully, the world outside the country was changing as well, but not as drastically. As Naruto had suspected, the moment that the harvester powered up and began to mine for energy to power up the Harmony in orbit, many shinobi with keen senses felt it. Most of the major villages sent shinobi to find out what the hell had done such a thing. But luckily for Naruto, the MRVNs had been able to quickly as well as easily install the various shield towers at all corners of the island. With them up and running, the entire place was cloaked from the outside since it not only was shielded from intruders, the shield showed a projection of the entire country being gone in a massive whirlpool itself. Those who came to see this dared not to get closer out of fear of being sucked in by said natural current. As Naruto grew in strength as well as intelligence while hidden away in Whirlpool, Konoha was making their own moves. Their plans had been in the works for years, and now that they had the manpower to begin their long-term plan they set out to do so. Their first part to their plan was the elimination of one Coyuki, daimyo of Spring Country. Manato and his councils knew that if their plans to conquer all the 5 major countries were to be a success, they would need the technological advantage. Past wars they needed aid from allied villages to win, but with the technological advantage they wouldn't need them this time around. Manato was a smart man and knew that Coyuki would not willingly part with such technology. He had tried using Danzo, who had a hidden ace up his sleeve in the form of a Sharingan hidden behind bandages to try and force her to their side, but for some reason it did not work on her. Apparently the woman was more strong-willed than they gave her credit for and would have to resort to drastic measures. When her uncle had been in power, Manato and his hidden allies had abducted various people in the at the time Snow Country to try and overthrow Koyuki's uncle via brainwashing them to Konoha's side. But their attempts failed and the man became paranoid as all hell to the point another chance never came to deal with him silently. But then came Naruto years later, who unknowingly eliminated the man personally, and as such Koyuki was able to take her rightful place on the throne. Once she was and the trading agreement between the two countries was finalized, it became far easier to put people where they needed to be when the time came to take control of the country itself once the final preparations were complete. And that time was now. Koyuki had been in a meeting with some people going over budgets for various fields, with this one being about medical facilities. When out of nowhere, Root Shinobi stormed in to attack her. The few samurai that were in the room with her held them off long enough to get to the secret entrance along with the few people who had been part of the meeting. The tunnel collapsed behind them so that they could not be followed, and so they began to sneak through her castle. There were peepholes at various places and she saw so many of her men getting cut down not just by Root that had managed to infiltrate her home, but even her own men had turned on those who were actually loyal to her. She didn't know why this was, but she would make them pay in time. The tunnels led to the dungeons deep underground, where they would then have to use another tunnel to escape altogether. She was met there by loyal men who were there to protect her, and led the way as they all escaped in the tunnel. Koyuki was told that Konoha betrayed them and had caused a coup with the people being lied to about just about everything. The throne was now being ruled by a lackey of Konoha, one they never caught the name of since their first priority was to see her safe and sound as well as out of harm's way. She was a daimyo, and if she were to escape and tell the world what Konoha did, well, it would not end well for them. Koyuki was understandably pissed at this betrayal, fully knowing that Konoha wanted their technology, and made a decision to scorn them and slow them down exponentially in a way they were not ready for. So in disguise, they made their way to the control panel that powered the generator that kept the snow at bay. She removed the key, and as she did, a harsh wind rushed inland, bringing forth a massive blizzard. It was like Mother Nature was making up for time lost as the snow was kept at bay. With this done, Koyuki and her group traveled away from the city for the next day and a half towards the ocean to get out of the country. But in the dead of night, which was only worse since the blizzard was still raging heavily, they were found by a group of enemies. Koyuki and her group were quickly surrounded by Root Shinobi. And as they were, those wielding weapons got in front so as to protect her since it was their duty to protect their daimyo. Even though the coup had outed her from her rightful throne, they were loyal to her, not the puppet that Konoha had weaseled onto the throne from under their noses. Yet the issue here was that out of those protecting Koyuki, only one was a shinobi, while the others were simply samurai. With their numbers being dwarfed as well, things did not look good for Koyuki and her group. Especially since these Root members were given the orders to take no prisoners and leave no evidence. All that was needed was the key to the device Koyuki took so that the generator would not work and her country would once more be shrouded in snow like it was before. But before Koyuki's group could even take a step in defense of their rightful ruler, a loud sound caused all of them, both the Root shinobi as well as the members of Koyuki's group, to see just what the hell had made such a thing. They were understandably shocked when they saw a giant metal being there that was kneeling down on one knee while it had a weapon of some sort held up in one hand. As it arose to look at the group fully towering over them by leaps and bounds, those in Koyuki's group were terrified since they thought it was some sort of monster while the Root showed no fear. They had been trained all their lives to stamp out such things as well as all other emotions, so this was no surprise. But this giant of a monster looked at them all with one glowing eye that shone blue. It looked at them for a few seconds before something on its shoulder moved. They heard multiple beeps of some kind originating from the monster, and then they just stopped. What happened next would shock the ones still alive for years to come since it was completely unexpected. Whatever had moved on the monster's shoulder shot out multiple dark objects that moved too fast to see exactly what they were. But in the end what they did was blew up all but one of the members of Root into bloody puddles that splashed all over the ground and littered the snow with its crimson color. The last Root member knew he had no chance against something capable of killing his entire group in seconds and ran away to report this to his master so a proper plan could be made to eliminate the threat. But the monster did not allow him to get far, since the monster lifted up whatever weapon it had and aimed it at the fleeing man before pulling the trigger of the 40mm tracker cannon it wielded to fire a round into the man that liquefied him as it had done to the rest of those in his group. It then looked up and around before it launched something into the distance that sent out a pain. Not sensing anyone else in the area, it holstered its weapon on its back before it looked at Koyuki, who was visibly shaking in fear since she had heard so many stories about monsters and they never ended well for the princess and them. At least until the handsome knight arrived to save them, but such a thing did not happen in real life like in the stories she heard as a child. "Are you unharmed?" asked the giant metal monster, which stumped the group that it could speak their language. Yes," said Koyuki nervously, her voice matching how she felt right now. "Understood," was all the monster said before it kneeled down in front of her on one leg. This caused her to question so much since the way it looked was that it was swearing loyalty to her, but those thoughts were thrown out the window when what she assumed was the monster's head opened up and showed that the inside was not only metal as well with so many fancy lights and dials and such, but there was a person as well inside the thing. She wondered if it was going to eat her like it had most likely eaten the person inside it. But said person got out of his seat and hopped out of the monster and walked towards her. "Koyuki," said the man, who she was not able to see his face due to the fairly advanced-looking helmet he had on. Their land was known for their advancements in technology, but this went far beyond anything their country was able to make. "Man, am I glad to see you again. I feared that I wouldn't arrive in time to help you." "Do I know you?" asked Koyuki in a quizzical manner since she was fairly sure she did not know someone who resembled the man in front of her. Especially one who she assumed controlled a metallic monster of all things like this one did. "Oh," said the man in a tone that showed he understood her quizzical nature, "sorry about that. It has been a while since we last met as well as the fact I am wearing a helmet on my head. Let me just take this thing off real quick." The man then took off his helmet to show his face, and boy was Koyuki shocked more than ever when she saw the face of her old friend Naruto Uzumaki smiling at her. "Naruto," was all she was able to say since in her shocked mood she wasn't able to form a full sentence. "The demon brat," whispered one of the members of Koyuki's group, which Naruto easily picked up on. Even with the high winds going on from the cold, he still heard it clearly. "Apparently you have a traitor in your group," said Naruto as he got in front of Koyuki and grabbed the kunai that had been thrown at the back of her neck. The one shinobi of the group had been tasked with hiding the tracking seal on his person so that the root shinobi could find their group and eliminate them when they thought they were safe and their guard was down. But now that the assigned group was literally a puddle of goo, he had to complete the mission and then use a smoke bomb as a distraction to get the key as ordered and escape. Yet even when the sneak attack failed he went through the hand signs to perform a jutsu, yet stopped halfway when Naruto held up something to his head that was pointed directly at his face. "No," was all Naruto said before he pulled the trigger of his B3 Wingman Elite, with the bullet coming out the back end of his head, leaving a hole going all the way through that one could actually see through if they were so inclined. Naruto had to admit that guns really trumped jutsu entirely. Sure, you could bend the elements to your will in various ways, but with a simple pull of a trigger you could do so much damage to people while they had to use hand signs to perform their attacks. "What the hell was that?" asked Koyuki since every second she was standing there her shock factor was only increasing by the second. "Not here," said Naruto simply as he holstered his sidearm, "you are still in hostile territory. I promise I will tell you everything, but I need to get you somewhere safe for now. Do you trust me enough to come with me?" Koyuki thought about it for a few seconds in genuine thought. While she knew Naruto was a Konoha shinobi since he had been part of their group when he and his squad protected her years ago, something must have changed since then since he had killed multiple shinobi from that particular village and he was not trying to either drag her back or even kill her. He was genuinely trying to aid her right now, and she would be a fool to refuse it at a time like this. So she simply nodded, which Naruto nodded back before he put his helmet back on. "BT," said Naruto to the mechanical monster, "call in the transport." "Affirmative," was all the monster said as it stood there. A minute later, they all felt the wind begin to blow away around them since the engines on the goblin dropship were doing this. The eyes on Koyuki's group opened comically wide since while they knew airships were a thing since their country had them, this was a whole new form of it that was far superior just by the design alone. It turned around as it set down to land, with the back hatch opening up to let the passengers on. It was a bit cramped due to the numbers, but they all fit inside as Naruto ushered them in. He himself then went to the front and took a seat in the co-pilot chair since a Spectre was piloting it now. BT grabbed a hold of the handles that were installed on the bottom to move Titans from place to place with this vehicle as the dropship rose up into the air. Sure, there were larger ones that could do this far better as well as faster, but those were meant for multiple Titans as well as full-scale assaults. This was nothing more than a rescue mission, one where he had arrived in the nick of time to save his friend. The blizzard outside masked their travel path easily from pretty much everyone, with the storm breaking only when they reached the water of the sea itself. But the radar on the ship was easily able to navigate through the storm no problem. Once out to sea, thought the trip was far smoother to say the least. No words were spoken the entire trip, mainly due to a mixture of the people aboard surprised as well as grateful that they survived the conquering of their old home and an attempt on their lives that nearly succeeded, mixed in with an unhealthy dose of shock over seeing such technology at this point of time. This didn't bother Naruto though, since he had spoken true when he said he would tell them everything when they got there. Once near New Angel City, Naruto punched in the clearance codes to open up the part of the cloaked shield that he was passing through so as to make the final landing. Once the dropship had landed with its engines turned off, Naruto flipped the switch to open the hangar doors once more so the people could walk out. They had to cover their eyes since it was so bright out and they had been in a blizzard, so it did sting a bit. Once their eyes could fully see again, their mouths dropped open wide in wonder at what they saw. Massive buildings, ones that were high up reaching to the sky with their multiple stories, empty business buildings of all shapes and sizes as well as homes going on for miles. And yet they saw not a single person there, which somehow was more surprising than seeing this place in the first place. "Welcome to my home," said Naruto as he walked out of the ship with his helmet off. BT quickly saluted him before he headed off towards a Titan engineering bay for a checkup, as was standard when returning from any and all expeditions or missions outside of the city. "This is New Angel City. How is this all possible?" asked Koyuki as she kept turning around in place to see everything her eye could see. It was like she was dreaming and she wondered just when she would wake up. "I'll tell you," said Naruto, "but for now you all need to rest. You were in a near-death experience and need to sleep the shock off before I tell you anything else. Trust me enough to know I speak the truth." "All right," said Koyuki as she saw those who had followed and tried to defend her nod in agreement. They all needed a rest from what they had just gone through. So Naruto led them to a block of houses and told them to take their pick since he was the only one who lived here at the moment until they arrived. He assured them that this was not permanent since there were thousands of others they could live in. It was just that these were the ones they were closest to, so they should sleep here for the time being until he explained things. He just warned them that the city was massive and since they had no idea as to the technology that went into building said city or the layout, they would get lost without him and he would have to spend so much time trying to find them. This way he could talk to them when they had rested up. "Plus I will cook food while you sleep," said Naruto, "since I highly doubt you guys know how to operate the machinery that is needed to cook. It's far more advanced than what you would think. And while I am not the best cook, it's far better than the robots make since they don't eat and thus have no sense of taste. Everything they make is bland as all hell." "What are robots?" asked one of the members in the group since she was confused by that word. "Not now," said Naruto as he pointed at the houses. "Go get some sleep for now and I'll explain everything in full when you wake up." And after he said that, they all split off into groups to sleep in separate houses since many were either family or couples. They had to admit that Naruto had been right about the fact that the technology inside was far more advanced than they thought possible. It took them a bit to find bedrooms, but once they did they all hit their mattresses and passed right out since they were so comfortable. As they all slept comfortably, Naruto hopped into a car and drove to an engineering bay. There he went to a control panel and typed in orders for multiple learning pods to be set up here for use ASAP. As soon as he hit enter on the keyboard, he saw hundreds of the MRVN run off to follow his orders. He was so glad these pods existed, not only because it helped him to understand most if not all the technology he had stumbled upon when he found his helmet before he had it repaired fully, but it would be needed to do the same for everyone else he brought into the city. The technology was too much for one man to explain, and this way he didn't have to. He then punched in an override code into the console as well, mainly since this was a place to build as well as fix things along with the main warehouse, one of many, where various robotic units charged up until they were needed. He did so to order ingredients for the food he was going to make and put in an address for their delivery. He then went back to his vehicle and drove back toward the house Koyuki herself was sleeping in and lay down on the couch. He took a quick nap since he was a bit sleepy, but only for a few hours. Once he had enough, he walked outside and found the supplies he ordered by the front door and brought them inside to begin cooking. Like he had admitted before, he was not a great cook, but his food was good enough to eat. So he set a massive pot to boil to make a stew. It was the best food he could make, as well as easier to make larger quantities to feed everyone here. The stew was just about done when people began to wake up. He had left them all notes on the door to come to this specific house, which they did and were happy to see him there with bowls of stew ready for them. It was only after resting that they realized they were far hungrier than they were aware of. While the stew itself wasn't anything to write home about, it was still edible as well as enjoyable to all of them. "So now can you explain what the hell all this is?" said Koyuki, who was not going to let him weasel his way out of a proper explanation this time. "I can," said Naruto as he finished up his bowl of stew, "and the answer to that is that all this technology is not from this world. You expect us to actually believe that you somehow managed to acquire some sort of alien technology?" "Well, I wouldn't say alien really," said Naruto in thought, since the people were human as well. They just weren't from this planet is all. It's still hard to believe, all things considered. I will grant you that, but where, my dear friend? Where in the world can you find such marvels other than here?" Said Koyuki, but she then stopped herself since he was correct to say that since there was nowhere that had such things. "Exactly. But now that everyone is well fed, I need you to come with me now." "And where are we going to go now? You all want answers to your questions, right?" asked Naruto with a raised eyebrow. "'Cause I will show you everything you possibly need to know about this place. So follow me, or don't if you don't want to. I'm not going to force you since you are not prisoners here. You would just be lost is all." The other people looked at each other as Naruto stood up and went outside. He had already ordered a couple of trucks so as to fit everyone comfortably in the back. They were being driven by MRVNs, but that was okay since they knew how to drive safely. One by one the people got into the backs of the trucks. From here they were driven towards the warehouse where the MRVNs were housed while recharging. In the center of the facility were numerous learning pods all set up and operational with the lights showing it. "What are those?" asked a man from the group. "These are learning pods," said Naruto. "To put it simply, you get inside, and it teaches you things at an accelerated pace in details that I myself can't do. If you want your answers as well as understand how to live here, all you have to do is enter one of these things. And yes, I know it seems fishy, but I promise you that this is not some sort of trick. It will not hypnotize you or alter you in any way. It simply teaches you what I myself learned in the past 2 years I have been here." "You have been here for 2 years?" said Koyuki in angry shock, "and you didn't think to share this with the world?" "And do what with it, Koyuki?" rebutted Naruto in a serious voice that caught her off guard. The last time she had seen him he was a kinder, gentler soul. But now it seemed as though time had not been kind to him to make him like this. The shinobi villages already have too many means to kill one another. They don't need this sort of technology to aid them. Like Konoha for instance. They spent years doing what they did to conquer your lands. Imagine what they would have done with this. The others all shuddered at the thought. There was already a slaughter in the castle by the hands of shinobi sent by Konoha. If they had metallic monsters as well, they did not want to think about it. "So what do you plan to do with all this now?" "For the moment," said Naruto with a shrug of his shoulders, "nothing." "So you are going to just stay here and let the elemental countries fend for themselves? Are you just that cold?" "Yes and no, Koyuki," said Naruto with a wag of his finger. "My plans will benefit the people in the future. What I plan to do is to let Konoha wage its war against the various countries. Little by little I will extract those who are against them and survive to live here, hidden away from the world. I will await the day Konoha wins in this war, which I admit they will since their plans are so deeply laid out that it is impossible to alter the end result. When they have won this war, when they are in the throes of celebrating their victory, the people who survived their one-sided war will rise up. Equipped with the technology far beyond even what your country can produce, Konoha will not win and be wiped out. I want all my enemies to reveal themselves, and they only will when they assumed they had won. That is my plan." "Wow," said the others in unison since his plan made sense perfectly. Why get involved just yet when you could let the enemy tire themselves out fighting others? To see someone so young come up with a plan like this was nothing short of impressive. And in the end we will advance ourselves beyond anything we thought possible. But for now, I want this city to become home for those who don't wish to fight in this war, the civilians who become casualties for something they have no say in. But for now, we will just wait until the next event presents itself where we can aid the people left. So what now? Asked Koyuki, who wanted to know their role for the future. Now? Said Naruto with a smile as he walked over to the control console and typed a few things in before hitting enter. When he did, the pod's lids all lifted up so that the people could get inside and lean against the padded backboard. You learn? The people looked at each other one last time before one by one they all each entered a pod. They heard the hiss as the top lowered on them. And yet in the darkness came a light, and within moments of the light appearing, they began to learn what they needed to survive in the new world that was to come. Time? It seemed like time was going at two different paces for the two fairly different places to live in the world. For Naruto and those he had saved from what was now Snow Country, again given the fact that Koyuki had taken the key that powered the generator to make it spring, time was going at a moderate pace. This was in part due to the fact that not only were they now living in a place that was far more advanced than the rest of their world combined when it came to the technology that made their lives significantly better, but the fact that they were learning so much as well, so this became the new normal to them. As the people who now inhabited New Angel City learned to survive in this new place, Naruto did as he did for the past 2 years when not training in the simulator and tinkered with tech in his spare time, which he had plenty of. You could only remain in the simulator for so long before you had to leave it to rest your mind. It was a built-in safety feature. He was thankful for the fact BT was there in AI form in his house while his main chassis was in the hangar ready for deployment. The house he chose for himself that was closest to the warehouses and the landing pads so he could leave at a moment's notice if and or when he needed to. He tinkered with some gadgets to try and replicate some things he saw in the archives he now had access to since the main memory bank came down in a shipment and was set up. When the various drops of ordnance were dropped planet-side, one of the things that was installed in the large vast building that became the library was this memory bank, which contained not only all the knowledge of the now extinct people that once made up the planet Harmony, but all the past episodes of a competition between various people from just as various backgrounds as well. It was known as the Apex Games, and Naruto loved to watch it. He saw the things they did, but the one person who caught his attention the most was a competitor known as Wraith. She was able to teleport short distances rapidly like Manato himself was able to do, but with the main difference being the fact she did not require special seals like he did. This intrigued him since if he could use that same ability, he would have an advantage in battle. Well, besides the 30-ton metallic giant that he called a friend with all the advanced weapons. But an advantage all the same. So he looked deep into the information on how to go about acquiring said power, and let me tell you that it was not simple. The information on the woman was wrapped up in such mystery, but the advantage Naruto had here was that there was no government officials coming after him for prying into their affairs like they would have in the past. So after digging deep into the files of Wraith, he finally saw what they had done to her, and it was not pretty in the slightest, but in a way it made the two of them kindred spirits since they had both suffered at the hands of others. Subject 61137, codenamed Wraith, as she was known in the Apex Games to all, was a whirlwind fighter, able to execute swift and deadly attacks and manipulate space-time by opening rifts in the fabric of reality. Years ago, as well as another dimension altogether, she woke up in an IMC detention facility for the mentally ill with no memory of her life before. She also began hearing a distant voice whispering in her mind that would keep her awake for days on end, nearly driving her insane. While Naruto had a secondary voice in his head, he at least knew where it came from since he had a demon beast sealed inside him. She was in the facility one day when a portal opened before she was to be sedated so the scientists could commence with that day's experiments. A person wearing a purple helmet came out, scaring the facility staff away since they had no means to fight this person since they were scientists, not soldiers. The person berated Wraith for not fighting back and revealed herself to Wraith. She was herself from another dimension, on a quest for revenge on the people who experimented on her. With this Voidwalker's help, she learned to trust the voices and was given the device by said Voidwalker needed for her to safely manipulate the void so as to use her abilities. And it was with that device that she escaped her captors once and for all. And it was that exact same device that Naruto was trying to recreate. Luckily for him, there had been a lot of information on said device since he was not the only one to wish to recreate it. The issue with them thought was the destruction of harmony, and thus survival became more important than trying to recreate a device. So Naruto was tinkering so as to finish the work of others since they had laid the groundwork for the device, he just needed to finish it. As he did that, Koyuki and the others were beginning to understand the new world they found themselves in. Weeks went by and they understood how to use the various things they were surrounded by, and they were surprised how simple it was to use when they were properly educated on the subject. But then came the main issue they faced with living here, which was what to do now that they actually lived here. For at least half of them, Koyuki included, they had been born into the world of politics and had no practical skills in any other major field, so with their forced relocation they no longer had such responsibilities to deal with. So with their newfound freedom of choice, they all discussed what they would do since there would be a need for all sorts of things. A few became cooks, others doctors, and a few became engineers since someone had to make sure the machines of the place were in proper working order. So they began to devote their time to training in their selected fields so as to master their craft in due time. Those who knew the life of a warrior easily knew what they wanted to do since they were already trained to fight, but now their skills could be enhanced far better than they had ever been, along with a plethora of new tools of destruction they had to work with. The training was harsh, with a lot to learn which dwarfed everything they already knew, but they overcame the challenges that the simulation put them through and persevered through it all. But the one person who surprised Naruto the most was Koyuki herself. To be honest, he had no idea what she wanted to do with her life now that her throne had been stolen from her like it had been. But he had no idea she would go the path she did. She wanted to not only become a soldier, but a pilot to a Titan as well. She had been enraged that her position had been taken by force, with her not being able to do anything to stop it since she as a daimyo relied on her own forces to do the fighting for her. Now that she lost her home for the second time in her life, she saw things in a new light. She saw that the daimyos of the world were weak, with the people turning on her so easily once enough lies about her were spread to solidify that dislike of her, and she no longer wanted to be that way, so if she ever ran a country once more she would not be easily ousted from her rightful throne once more. She would no longer solely rely on her men to protect her since she was done being a damsel in distress, and so when the next time Konoha or any other enemy for that matter decided to challenge her, they would not find her so easy to take down. Becoming a pilot was not easy, and the training for it was at least 4 to 5 times more extreme than the standard riflemen or the others that make up the bulk of the military. It was made to be this way since Titans were not infinite, and those in charge needed to know that their Titans were being piloted by the best of the best so that they would be used to their maximum potential. But even when this was all explained to her, she was not deterred and demanded to be trained into a pilot. So Naruto spent time every now and then to train her personally in the simulation, and like he had warned her, the training was brutal. But she pushed through everything he pit against her, which surprised him since the others had tried and all given up on being pilots themselves and resigned to becoming riflemen themselves instead. It took months before she was ready to begin actual training with the Titan, and when that happened she had to try out all models of them before she decided on the one she wanted. The downside to this was each one was locked into one specific loadout, unlike BT, who was the last Vanguard model which could use all Titan weapons since he was programmed and built that way. He planned to make more in the future, but he wanted to use the Titans in the hangar first before he started to build more, plus there was only one pilot at this point of time, with a new one potentially being trained. In the end, she picked the Monarch-class Titan. This made Naruto chuckle since she herself was royalty, so to pick the one named after it was a bit humorous. But once the Titan was picked, the harsher training began. And Naruto held nothing back as he did. He fought her time and time again in the simulation with BT, and he showed no mercy as he repeatedly decimated her over and over again. Koyuki grew pissed the more she lost, but Naruto explained that while they may be fighting simply Shinobi now, in the future when the technology they were using was made known to the rest of the world there would be more fights at some point that would involve the newer stuff like Titans. Peace was never eternal, so it was the best to prepare for the worst case scenario now while they had no worries about it actually happening than later when time was more of a factor. So Koyuki took his lessons to heart, and with every defeat she learned more as time went on. Eventually she began to fight back well enough, with Naruto making a genuine mistake and losing their bout for the first time. This made Naruto smile since she was improving at a faster pace than he had thought, which made him realize that the others who would learn in time could train just as fast. They would need the numbers since if they were going to fight in this, what he pretty much chalked up to be a short war, they would need the numbers as well. With the aid of BT, Naruto designed a simulation using data about the Shinobi from Konoha, with the scenario being an assault on Konoha itself in the simulation. While they were able to do lots of damage given the advancements in technology, the enemy always adapted to beat them back, and their mission would be a failure. It was because they didn't have the numbers to fight. They had the technology, but they lacked the raw numbers. Even Coyuki and himself would be beaten if large summons were used, which pissed him off, but the summons their most power shinobi used towered over titans by leaps and bounds, so they would have to strategize against them in the future. Sure, there were simple bombing runs they could do, but the damage to the land would be heavy and they planned to rebuild what was destroyed after the dust cleared in this war. You can't do that if everything was scorched to ashes now, can you? While the others were still training as well as learning down to the last detail of their crafts, Naruto was tinkering with the device that he had been working on for months in what was dubbed the War Room. Here in this facility he had monitors that all showed the various VIPs he had the satellites keep an eye on so that he knew their every move and strength, since to beat an enemy it was best to know them. The satellites were able to pick up audio from all these people and much more with detailed images of the places that made up the world. While in the other dimension, the opposition would place towers to hinder a satellite's ability to do any of this. No such technology existed outside of New Angel City, so there was nothing they could do. Hell, the technology actually heard through silencing seals, and that made the more secretive information known to him, which was what piqued his interest the most. Like the fact that Manato was extremely pissed that right now he had yet to find Naruto anywhere. He had people all over looking for him, yet there was not even a hair of him anywhere to be found, which was easy to see why given where he was located right now and the lack of just about anyone coming this way. Then there was the fact that Koyuki had not only escaped, but she had taken the key to the generators that heated the country with her. At first he had thought that she had made it to another country, but no actions were taken that stated as such, and he chalked it up to being lost at sea since there was really no other explanation for it. But in many of these secret meetings between the higher-ups of Konoha, Naruto had overheard that apparently he was part of some prophecy told to Jiraiya, which piqued his own personal interest since this was not something he would have expected to hear. Apparently a student of Jiraiya, one of the Uzumaki clan, would be responsible for the survival or the destruction of the Shinobi Way. While Menma was a student of Jiraiya as well, which put him in the running for being the one the prophecy spoke of, they wanted Naruto under their control so that on the off chance he was the right one they could manipulate things so that Konoha would reign supreme. Menma was naturally loyal to the village his family was from without any issue, but Naruto had been raised to be a weapon, so he needed to be controlled to force his loyalty. Naruto had laughed so hard as he had overheard this since they had tried too hard to make him subservient for that. They could have treated him better and he would have willingly fought for the village since at one point it had been his home, but the route they took with him had made him only hate the village with absolutely everyone in it. He had actually spent time listening to every last individual in the village, and there was not a one who he would spare in the future when the time came to attack. His fellow classmates, well, he already knew they hated him, but he had looked at the world through rose-tinted glasses since it was the only way he could live with just that spark of joy in his life that the villagers had spent so long trying to snuff out. Hinata, well, that was easily self-explanatory since the woman was a gold-digging whore who had gotten pregnant by another man and lied to his face while saying it was his own. He had heard about how happy she was now with the birth of their son, who they named Madara in honor of one of the most powerful Uchiha to exist. Sasuke had such high hopes for his son, but unlucky for him it would mean little when Naruto and the others who made up the militia attacked and wiped them all out. The various people who had went out of their way to show him a speck of kindness, all the while messing with him and lying to his face? They would all pay in time. The way he was raised so as to control him like they did? He would see the Shinobi Way destroyed down to the last one. But that was not going to happen for quite some time. Since Konoha, while they now had access to Snow Country and all its technological wonders, which made Naruto smirk since what was advanced to them was archaic to him and the others in the militia, The snow made it harder for them to excavate the land for more. Their progress was hindered by Koyuki's actions, which the man who now sat on the throne used to his advantage by calling Koyuki a traitor who did this to spite her people. And while the people were at first not believing it, eventually they began to listen and believe the lies told to them to the point they resented Koyuki themselves. Propaganda was a very powerful tool when used well, like in this situation. So in the past 2 years that Naruto and Koyuki's group had been living a far more peaceful life hidden away from others, Konoha had begun to equip their shinobi with chakra armor as well as produced multiple airships to use that were outfitted for war. They didn't stop there since they needed ships as well to reach Kiri, and after 2 years they were nearly ready to begin their war with the other villages. But right now they were trying to gain any and all advantages they could get their hands on to make sure this campaign went smoothly. And luckily for them, a spy of theirs mentioned how the six-tailed Jinchuriki himself had been discovered in hiding as he ran from the hunter Nin who had been hunting him for quite some time. The prospect of acquiring a Jinchuriki to replace the one they lost was too much to pass up, so they sent out a special unit to capture their new weapon. They would have normally sent more, but if they did, the other villages would snoop around where they were not wanted and they didn't want to tip their hand too soon. So Sasuke and a team of highly trained Anbu went out to hunt this man down in the name of their village. Naruto heard Minato give the order, and smirked since the man had given him the perfect means to strengthen his own group with that order. Plus he could kill 2 birds with 1 stone since now he had the perfect chance to eliminate the bad memory that haunted his mind named Sasuke. The arrogant ass had actually improved his skills in the last 2 years he had been here. He no longer bragged about being elite and actually put in the effort to do so. Apparently fatherhood changed him for the better or worse if you learned what he did to acquire a good portion of his power. Apparently there was 2 means to acquire the Mangekyo Sharingan, with the main means being the killing of one's own best friend, but the other was just as bad in the broad scheme of things. The other means was the killing of someone utterly devoted to you. And guess who filled that exact criteria? Poor Sakura. She never saw that Chidori to the heart coming, or the sinister smile on Sasuke's face to show that he enjoyed what he was doing. Apparently Sasuke allowed her to be the fanatical fangirl she was so that she could be used as she had. And while Naruto personally didn't like the banshee-voiced bitch, no one deserved to be manipulated like that for the power of another. So as Sasuke and the others in his squad grouped up and prepared for their mission, Naruto called the members of the militia and explained the situation. They all agreed that aiding the fleeing Jinchuriki was a perfect strategy, and so they all went to the armory near the landing pads and geared up for their own mission. Any chance to hinder Konoha meant that the members of the militia were better trained as well as prepared for the end when they revealed their existence to the world. Plus throw in the fact that there would be more people to teach in the future, they would need time to properly train people into soldiers. Naruto smiled as he picked up the weapons he was going to bring for this mission. While he would have liked to bring BT, the area was too close to enemy territory and would stick out like a sore thumb really. He didn't want to give Konoha the idea of a hidden in plain sight enemy to hinder their efforts any. So he walked towards the ship with the rest of the soldiers, and as he did he strapped on his completed Voidwalker device onto his arm, having completed and tested the device only a week before. Now was the perfect time to see just how well it would work in a real-life situation like this one. And with all the men on board, and Koyuki and the others who were not coming seeing them off, the hatch closed and the ship rose up into the air before it took off into the direction of their target. Border of Fire Country. Alright men, said Sasuke in a commanding voice since he was the leader of this group sent out on this mission. We know the target is around here somewhere. Spread out and find him, but do not attack him by yourself. He is a Jinchuriki, so we need to do this together if we are to beat him. Sasuke might have gotten stronger in time, but even he knew that a fight against a Jinchuriki, especially one who was most likely fluent in the use of his demonic power, he would struggle. While he believed he could win if it came down to it, he wanted the extra muscle to ensure victory in the end. The shinobi that had come with him were just about to set out to do as ordered, but before anyone could do it, they heard a weird whooshing sound before one of their members dropped dead. This shocked them since they sensed no enemies near them, nor was there a clear cause of death. There was a hole in the man's head that was bleeding, but no weapon they had seen could make such a wound like this. A jutsu might if it was wind related, but then came the fact that they would have felt the chakra being used to cast it. Yet none of them would get the chance to ponder on this question anymore, since within the span of 3 seconds, each and every one of those shinobi, sans Sasuke, fell down with matching wounds to the head. What the fuck is happening? Demanded Sasuke in shocked horror. He had expected a few casualties, since given their mission was against a strong opponent with nothing to lose, but this went way beyond what he expected, since they had all died before they even faced the guy. Well, said a voice from behind Sasuke, which caused him to jerk his head around as well as upwards, since the voice was coming from above him. The area he was in had a small mountain range with a few cliffs sprouting out of it. Seems like you are in quite the predicament here. Who the hell are you? Shouted Sasuke in anger that this man had somehow managed to sneak up on him like this. Sitting on the cliff was a man with a green mask that had orange stripes on it. He had on what appeared to be armor, but unlike any he had personally ever seen in his life, which was surprising given the chakra armor he was currently sporting. I know it has been a few years, said the man with a chuckle, but I didn't think you would forget your old squad mate so easily like this. Wait a second, said Sasuke in realization to this bit of information. Naruto? So you do remember me, said Naruto as he hopped off the cliff he was sitting on with a simple push of his hands. The shock bracers in his footwear absorbed the impact of the fall, but this was standard issue for pilots since they were supposed to be as agile as possible. While it helped immensely for most situations, but terminal velocity was another thing altogether, and the shock bracers would not help then. So we have that at least. I don't know why you are here, started Sasuke before Naruto cut him off. I'm pretty sure you do, said Naruto, since I am here to help a fellow brother, one you are currently hunting. You are too late to capture the Jinchuriki for whatever village you are currently allied with. See, said Naruto with a shake of his head, you are wrong there, since I am not here on the orders of another village. I don't work for anyone other than myself. And, capture. I am here to aid my fellow Jinchuriki so that he won't be enslaved like you planned to do to him. You came with shackles and no other options, but I am coming with nothing more than understanding as well as plenty of better options to choose from. It matters not why you are here, said Sasuke as he got into an attack form as he had trained to do for years, since I will capture the man, and now you as well, since you have no hope to beat me. I'm not sure how you managed to kill my men, but I'm more than sure that the Yamanaka will have a field day extracting it from your mind. Are the dead bodies surrounding you not a clear indication of failure for you? Asked Naruto in a genuine question. I will not fall as easily. Actually you would, said Naruto with a chuckle, but me and you have a score to settle, so I prefer to fight you by hand so you know just who made you his bitch in the end. Say that to my face, coward. Demanded Sasuke, who would not allow someone he saw as weaker than him speak to him in such an insulting manner. So that you can use your Sharingan to manipulate me? Said Naruto with a raised eyebrow. Not that Sasuke could see it given the fact he had a helmet on that covered his face. Not going to happen, buddy. You want to beat me? You are going to do it the old-fashioned way. Naruto then whipped out a black metallic stick that was thick except the handle. Sasuke saw this as the sign to begin fighting, and charged forward to attack Naruto. Naruto would admit that Sasuke's hand-to-hand form was impressive, but he had spent years in the simulation training in CQC, a form of hand-to-hand that was better for this situation. So for all of Sasuke's training, he was outmatched when it came to a battle of fists. But to make that fact more apparent, Naruto waited for Sasuke to leave an opening, which he did eventually. The second he did, Naruto flipped the well-concealed switch on his baton to cause electricity to course through it and into Sasuke, who screamed in pain as the area was awash with light from the device. Eventually Sasuke overcame the pain and threw Naruto off of him to gain some space between them. Sasuke was panting since whatever device Naruto had used had hurt like hell. He now knew that he would have to put more of an effort to beat Naruto, which he would have done in any other situation, but it was due to the fact that he needed to manage his strength to not only fight him but capture the Jinchuriki he was ordered to in the first place, that was making this harder for him since he couldn't waste all his strength on one or the other if he was to succeed in his mission. So are you done holding back yet? Said Naruto as he casually tossed his stun baton in the air while he waited. Because not going to lie, I expected far more from a self-titled elite such as you. Sasuke heard this and grew far more pissed than he was already. In his anger he activated his Mangekyo Sharingan to put an end to this nuisance here and now. Hell, he didn't even care if he killed Naruto since the mission was to capture one Jinchuriki, Minato didn't know Naruto was even here, nor would he tell him. "Did I strike a nerve?" said Naruto with a chuckle as he threw the stun baton at Sasuke's head with precise accuracy. Sasuke easily dodged the thrown object, but Naruto had wanted him to since he was too occupied to dodge the fist to the face that followed. "Good, now we have ourselves a real fight here." Sasuke roared in rage as he went through the hand signs to blow out a steady stream of flames towards Naruto. Naruto didn't fret since what appeared to be a dark shoulder pad on his armor unraveled and extended outward towards Sasuke. It didn't detach from Naruto or anything, but what it did do was erect an energized particle wall that stopped the flames from reaching him. Naruto then pulled out what appeared to be a simple shuriken, which was the furthest thing from the truth, and threw the thing a little to the right of Sasuke. This weapon was known as a gravity star, and one could easily guess what it did by the name alone. So once the device activated, the gravity being sucked inwards towards the device caused Sasuke to become unbalanced enough for Naruto to rush forward and kick him hard in the gut to the point he went flying a bit backwards. "Is this seriously all you can do, Sasuke?" asked Naruto as he walked over and picked his stun baton back up from where it currently was right now. "That is a disappointment. How you plan to avenge your family when you are so weak like this is beyond me, really." Sasuke's rage reached its apex as he heard Naruto say those words, and with a roar of pure unfiltered rage he activated the Susanoo in full to put this fucker down once and for all. The purple giant chakra entity was fairly menacing to look at, but Naruto was not afraid since he had a plan to fight Sasuke when he used this. Sasuke tried to smash Naruto with his Susanoo's fists alone, but Naruto, being a pilot and all, was agile enough to easily dodge these blows easily enough. There were a few close calls, but he had his handy grappling hook to pull him faster forward to avoid them. Sasuke's rage grew the more he missed, which was only made worse since Naruto kept mocking him for every time he missed. Eventually Sasuke actually thought of a plan instead of letting his anger dictate his methods of attack, and formed two spikes of energy that he pierced the mountainside with in a manner that Naruto could no longer avoid his attacks anymore since he was stuck between them. "I got you now, fool," said Sasuke with a smirk as he summoned up his Susanoo's sword, the main weapon it used, and then thrust it forward towards Naruto to end him here and now so that he would never be able to utter another insult towards him or anyone else again. While Sasuke had assumed victory here, he was unaware of the fact that Naruto had planned on this from the beginning. He had studied Sasuke for quite some time and knew his methods of fighting to a T now. While that might sound creepy, which in all reality it was bordering on obsessional, but the best way to fight someone was to know them inside and out, so Naruto did just that. If Naruto knew he had no hopes of fighting Sasuke, he would have simply put a bullet through him along with the other shinobi his men had killed before they went to track their target. But Naruto not only knew he could beat Sasuke, but knew just how to, since he had such an obvious weakness. His pride. Sasuke might be stronger than he was years ago when he and Naruto were members of the same squad, yet he was easily pissed off when his strength was brought into question like Naruto had multiple times, and when one becomes angry they make too many mistakes like Sasuke had now. In a fight of jutsu, Sasuke would have won hands down, yet he had no idea as to the things Naruto could do now. As the blade neared him, Naruto could only smile since Sasuke had been such an idiot to fall right into his trap like this. He held up his hand, which then caused a massive black portal with blue edging to appear before him. Sasuke had put too much power into his thrust to stop what was going to happen, and that was why Naruto had done as he had by pissing him off like this. The sword made of chakra went through the portal, but it came out elsewhere. The second portal appeared right in front of the Susanoo itself, with the blade piercing the entity, hitting Sasuke at such speed and power that not only was he launched from the chest where he controlled the thing, but his chakra armor was overloaded and shattered into pieces as he was. He fell hard to the ground as his Susanoo disappeared since he was no longer there to control the thing. "Well," said Naruto as he waved his hands a bit so that both portals disappeared from existence. He was so happy that he had taken the time to build these things since he could see the benefits of having such a device on hand in the thick of things. "That just about wraps thing here. Don't you understand?" coughed Sasuke since he was in a lot of pain right now. The Susanoo was a powerful jutsu, but it was abundantly clear that it had a weakness of itself, which was a strange thing to say in itself. Sasuke had not expected his attack to be reflected like his had been, and the blowback was painful. He was slowly backing away while still on the ground in pain from Naruto so as to put as much distance as he could between them. But he then hit the cliff wall and tripped, so he was now flat on his ass as Naruto was still standing there. "You are weak. No matter what you do to us, you will not win and be put under the heel of your betters in the end." Naruto simply sighed as he pressed the side of his helmet so that the front end opened up like a mouth to show his face, and while Sasuke expected to see some sort of anger in his expression, there was none. In fact, all Naruto showed in his facial features was disgust. Disgust towards the arrogance of this guy who refused to admit when he had been beaten to the end. It was sickening, since while there was prideful, this went beyond that. That's all for now. If you enjoyed, then please like, share and do comments.